All right, so we're recording. This is session 4 of the Code Platoon Bootcamp Prep class. This session, we're going to talk about object literals, or just for short, objects. We've already talked about them throughout this course. We talked about them on the first night. We've been using them. And so now we'll do a little bit deeper dive on it here. So what is an object literal? It's a data type that holds a collection of properties where each property is an association between a name, the key, and a value. So if you remember when we kind of talked about this the first night, that the key has to be unique. So we could put multiple key ones in there, but it's only ever going to see one of them at a time. However, the values, there is no unique requirement, and they can be all different sorts of data. So like it can be a string, it can be a Boolean, it can be a number, it can be a float, it can be nested objects. So we can put objects inside of objects. We can also put arrays in there as well. So when we kind of look at person over here on the right, like first name is a string, last name's a string, eye color is a string, and then age is a number. And object literal keys and values do not have to just be string data types. They can be any other types as well. So kind of like what we just talked about. And also one other thing to talk about is that we know objects, unlike arrays, do not have index positions, right? So if I want to get inside of an object, if I do object like box 1 here, nothing will pull up unless I actually have a key of 1, but we're not actually pulling anything by index. Okay, so interacting with an object literal, simple example here. So Code Platoon is a nonprofit. So we can access the value by key and dot syntax, and we can also do it in bracket syntax. All right, so if we pull up Replit here. Right, so we could do something just like this. So we could say, let org equal name, Code Platoon, and we'll do type nonprofit. Okay, now notice I put a comma in here. And so every key value pair in here needs to be comma separated. So I deleted that comma, I hold this over here, just get comma expected. And so even though it's telling me right here, that just means that it goes at the end of the line right before the error. So now same thing, I can say org.name, and we should get Code Platoon, right? So there's Code Platoon. And the same, what they were saying is that we can do it as box notation as well. And I think I've got to wrap these in quotes. Yep. So when doing it in here, I have to basically put it in quote marks. So make it a string. And there's Code Platoon. And same thing here. We can wrap these in quotes over here as well. And it's not always mandatory when you're using a single word. So if I say like name of org, so that's okay. We're doing camel case. It's all one word, but I can't do name of org, right? So see how we light this up in an error over here. So if we did need some more user-friendly naming, we'd then have to basically turn it into a string on this side. But for just like ease of use right now and for keys, like we want to keep them as simple and descriptive as possible. we'll just stick with name and type right now. And same thing here. I can go back here and I can access type. Right, so also nonprofit. How do I do inline variables in my string? Anybody remember?
Is it
Single,
not concatenate? Is that what it's called?
well, string concatenation would be if I wrap it in double quotes and then put plus signs between everything.
Okay.
So if I want to do what's called a string literal or a template literal, I need backticks, right? And so now I can say $, and then curly braces, org.name is a org.type, right? So now we're pulling information out of a data type. This is like where we're storing the information, but when we need to access the information and use it, then that's how we pull it out, right? And so I've pulled it out this way, and same thing, I can go wrap this in brackets, wrap it in quotes, and I get the same thing, right? Now, you can access this either way you'd like to, but when we're typing all day long, this is more keystrokes than dot notation. So you can do it however you want to do it. No one's really going to yell at you over it because both ways are right. But I would say that for the most part, especially in JavaScript land, like this is going to be the more common way that you're going to see it. All right, so let's see here. Let me pull this back up. All right. Oops. Okay, so, and then interacting with an object. So again, same thing here. We can use control flow. So when in is used besides an object, it can check for containment against the keys. So if name in organization console.log true, else console.log false, or we can use the built-in method has own property. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. So we can say console.log. Let me just make sure I got the syntax correctly here. So basically with the in keyword here, so that's our comparison. So console.log, or here, we'll just do this. If name in org and okay, and so they're wrapping name in quotes here. Right, so we know that name is in there. We could say names, and we would expect to get false, and we do. Does anyone know how we could shorten this up a little bit? Just a simple if-else statement. What's another way that we could do this?
The
Turkey.
Yep, the turnkey. Yes, the ternary operator. So what we could also do then is say let key equal name and I may have just written myself into a corner here that I don't think we can do it this way because it's going to throw an error for me. Maybe. I stand corrected. So you can do it in the ternary. Sorry, the little, it threw me off there a little bit. And same thing, I don't necessarily have to assign this to a variable if I don't want to. All right, so now if I change this to dog, right, now we get false because we know that dog isn't in there. Type, if I can spell it right. So we flip it back to true. So and we also then have the built-in property. So organization.hasOwnProperty name. All right, and we get a true for that as well. Let's comment this out and comment this out. All right, and again, understanding that this does the exact same thing as this, that does the exact same thing as this is very important. And without understanding what the, like how to construct that if else, without understanding how to construct that ternary, if you just use the built-in property, but you can't explain exactly what it's doing, that is like the difficulty with it. You want to be able to, it's kind of like if you're doing land nav, right? Like they don't just hand you a GPS and let you wander around and just look at the plugger and it gives you the 10-digit grid of wherever you're standing. They give you a map and a crayon and a compass, and they let you get lost in the hills somewhere for a little while. And yes, so someone else is taking land nav. And so when you understand how to read the map, how to use the compass and do it manually, then it becomes okay that you do it this way. Because for whatever reason, if you don't have this available, which you never would in live day-to-day programming, but if you ever walked into an interview and they said, hey, show me how or how would you check to see if a key is in an object, and you say, oh, well, easily, I would just do object.hasOwnProperty and look for the key. And they say, okay, that's great. Now tell us how you would do it without this. Then if you can't explain that, like, then you're going to have a really tough time in the interview. And so what employers are typically looking for in that situation is not that you know necessarily the built-in method, but that you understand what's going on behind the scenes with that. All right, so let's see here. Okay.
Hey, Charles.
Yes, sir.
Does that only checks if the key exists, right? Not if anything's assigned to it necessarily?
Correct. Yeah, that's just that the key exists in there, and the key doesn't have to have anything, I believe. And if the, let's see here, or maybe it does. Yeah, so it would probably just do like a null, like if I wanted it to be empty, like you wouldn't just leave it completely empty, or like an empty string, or you may see it as undefined, right? But yeah, that is just telling you that the key exists. It doesn't tell you what value is assigned to the key.
Thanks.
So, and this wouldn't necessarily be useful when you're trying to find the value, but if you're ever trying, like if you're doing an operation where you're going to be adding new key value pairs to the object, you would want to see if that object already exists before you throw the other one in, because remember, it won't give you an error. It'll just copy, like it'll just basically, it'll be like the existing key doesn't exist anymore, right? So if I do name code platoon, right, and then I do name not code platoon, right, when I do this, it'll still tell me that the property exists, but if I do console.log org.name, I believe it'll always give me the last one entered, right? Not code platoon. And so now I've I've basically caused an error in my data, and there is no error message telling me that that happened. And it's very easy for me to see what I've done right here. But if I'm doing something where I'm adding an additional key and that's not on the screen, now it becomes very difficult to see that I've actually done damage to the data. And a lot of times, like when we're doing, this is called like functional programming, we're just writing small, low level, small programs. It's one thing, but like if I'm damaging data that's in a database somewhere, or like I'm telling my software that's going to be running overnight when no one's looking at it, like, hey, add 1,500 values to the database overnight tonight, and I'm just stamping the same name over the top of it. When I come in the morning, I'm going to have a really big mess on my hands. And that's if I'm lucky and it gets caught in the morning. What's horrible is when it gets caught like 6 months or a year down the road, when they go to retrieve something out of the archive, and then you find out that everything's screwed up. And by the way, like that bit of code that you wrote has been running every single day for the last year, like stamping in the wrong like keys every single day. And now you've got to go back and fix a year's worth of data. And so everything is very easy when we look at it this way, but it can get very complex. And it's kind of hard to imagine the situations when we have everything in the screen. But when you're actually writing larger programs, not everything will be on the screen at the same time. Okay. All right. So this is, and so again, this is the same as this, as the same as this. All three of these are different ways to do the exact same thing. Okay, so some built-in methods. Object has own property keys, so it returns a Boolean true or false if the key exists. So if we want to know all of the keys that are in here, so I can say console.log org.keys, and I would expect to get an array that has, let me clean this up real quick. Actually, I'll run it broken once here real quick. Okay, so, yep, it did not like that. So keys. Let's see what happens when I clean the data up. So let's read what we've got here then. Sorry, I have been writing Ruby all day today, and in Ruby you don't have to put the parens at the end of a method call, and JavaScript you definitely do. So 1 second here. Org keys is not a function. I beg to, oh, sorry. I bet I have to do object.keys org maybe. There we go. So object is the prototype. So this is an object, and with objects, you will see that they're called this way. So if you ever run something on it, that's kind of like the default, like, and just from experience, most of the time you run like something on an array prototype, like you're going to do like array.length, not array.length, and then the array that you're working on in there. But objects are a little bit different. So object.keys org returns my 2 keys. If I do the same thing for values, so there are my values. And what was the last one we were looking at here? Entries returns an array of key value of the object when iterating through it.
Hey, what
Right.
if you have multiple objects?
Well,
Can you have multiple objects?
so yes, and in multiple different configurations, right? So I can say, like, let right? So now I have two objects. I have an object that's org, and I have an object that is pet.
Okay.
And they're not related to each other. These are just two completely separate variables, right? But now within a object, I can also have additional objects, right? So I can say courses, and here's another object, right? Like in person, and say true and hybrid, which it doesn't sound like they're offering currently because of the changes, false, prep course, true, right? And so these are all, now I've got an object with the different types of courses available inside of this as well, right? And same thing. So now I could say employees, right? So CEO, Rod, so like director of outreach, Greg, lead instructor, Tom. All right. And so, oops, and I need a comma in here. So now I've got two nested, like two nested objects inside of my largest object. And this is unlimited. Like, I mean, eventually you could technically run a computer out of memory, but for the, like the purposes of this language, like you can have, you can keep going, right? So like I can do teaching assistants, sorry, my keyboard is a Bluetooth keyboard and it's kind of lagging out on me right now. So like TA1, right? Right, and so now, like, org is an object. I can do this here real quick. Let's comment some of these out. All right, so I can say console.log org, right? And there's the whole thing. And now, to be very honest, like, when, especially when you're first starting off, and I do this all the time too. I like when you start dealing with APIs, which is how basically like backend servers send data from the back end, like it pulls it out of the database and it sends it to the front end so that you can see it on the screen. In JavaScript, it does it in very large objects. I may look at objects some days that have maybe like 200 or 300 data points in them, and those can be nested into, 10 or 12 different objects inside my object, and they can be all over the place and they mean different things. So for instance, like, again, like I work with people that are trying to join the military. So if I get an object back that says applicant, it's going to have an object that has all of their personal data in it. It's going to have an object that has their family member data in it. It's going to have an object that has their medical, and it's going to have an object that has their ASVAB scores in it. And every time they take an ASVAB, it creates a new object inside the object. And like I said, it can get very small. And I don't necessarily know, like, hey, this is my endpoint. Like, I know the exact thing that I need to type in to get there. So like, if I want to get in to my name in here, so like TA2 Charles, what I would do is just start off here. So, okay, console.log org. All right, so now I have the whole thing. Well, if I look in here, I don't want the name, I don't want the type, I don't want the courses, employees. Okay, I can see myself down here in teaching assistant. So now I can basically do employees. I'll run it again. Okay, so now we're here, right? And so now I can do teaching assistants. And notice how when I did that, so I type in T, and we've got all these different things in here. And so like if I pick this, I don't think it'll give me an answer. It should throw undefined because I'm not there yet. But it knows that teaching assistants here as well. So now I can run it. So now I'm into here. And now I can dial .ta2. And now I've drilled all the way down into my name. All right. And so much of what we'll be doing is crawling through different data structures and figuring out exactly how we pluck out the information that we need, right? So let's say that I'm building a login page for the instructors at Code Platoon, and I want it to say, welcome, Charles, when I sign in to put my notes in at the beginning of the day. Then it would do the same thing. Let's say that the back end sends me this big blob of all this information. Well, then I would just say, just exactly like this, like kind of what I did earlier is, right? And there's welcome, Charles. So, and same thing, like when someone else logs in, you do welcome Encore, and so on and so forth, depending on where it is. And that's how we just crawl through there and find out where that data is stored, and we pull it out and we then present the data as we need it. Okay, so let's see here. And I'm sorry, I've missed who, was that you, Jason, that asked that question?
Yeah, that was me. And actually that makes more sense than a lot of the stuff. It almost puts some of the other lessons together. So gotcha.
Okay.
Followed right along with that, believe it or not.
So, and I want to say, so that is the last slide for session 4. We definitely have some challenges to work on today. Before we get to the challenges, we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. So I want to ask if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, and get those out of the way, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll start taking some swings at some of the challenges out there tonight. So anyone have any questions on anything, session 1, 2, 3, 4, what Greg had to say up till today? The only thing I can't tell you is what you're getting for Christmas. I can tell you what I'm getting for Christmas. Anyone?
What are you getting for Christmas?
I'm getting a Instant Pot Pro 8-quart pressure cooker / air fryer combo, and I'm pumped.
Nice.
Got that Black Friday deal.
Nice.
All right. So if you guys think of anything over the break, feel free to ask me when we get back, and then we'll start looking at some of the challenges. Did anyone get a chance to check out the recording posted to YouTube?
I did, because last week.
Okay. Was it a good copy?
Yeah, everything was fine with it.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it at 7:17. Let's go ahead and get back together at 7:25. So 8-minute break. I know I held a little longer than an hour today, and then we'll start knocking out some of the challenges together. I'll talk to everyone at 7:25. All right, and we're live. Okay, so welcome back from the break. We're going to go ahead and tackle a problem here together as a group. I'll ask for some input and see if we can walk through this. And then it looks like we've got about 12 people hanging tough, so that'll be 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. We'll see how people feel about the challenge. We're going to split up, and then we'll break out into rooms, I'll check in on everyone, give them a chance to work towards the solution on your own, and then we'll bring the group back, do a debrief, and kind of cover and answer from there. All right, so if we look through the kind of like the standard process of questions that we need to ask ourselves here, how many parameters are in this function that we're going to work with?
1? Oh,
Yep, just 1, right? And what is that parameter going to be?
Sum.
Yep. So the name of the parameter is sum, and the type is going to be a number, right? So given a number, it says right there, representing the sum of cards in a hand, write a method that returns a string that is the appropriate response in a game of blackjack. If the sum of the cards in the hand is less than 15, return hit. If the sum is between 15 and 21 inclusive, return stand. And if the sum is greater than 21, return bust. All right. So how many different branches to our control flow are we going to need here?
3?
3.
Yep, three different branches. And then what are we going to be returning out of here? Like what type of parameter are we returning?
String.
Okay, yep, we're going to return a string. All right, so what would my initial if statement look like?
If sum is less than 16.
15? I'm not sure if you said 15 or 16. So, but we want to do 15, right? So if it's less than 15, we want to return hit. Right? And now are we going to go to an else, or are we going to do an if else or else if?
If else.
If else.
Is it if else or is it else if? I can never remember.
I think it's Elsif.
Yes, else if. So now we're saying inclusive of 15 and 21. So how would we write this?
No.
Greater than or equal to 15, but less than 21.
Okay, so what we would do is we can say if sum is greater than or equal to 15 and sum is less than or equal to 21, right? So I know like in math, we would just write it like this, right? So, but the computer won't know how to handle that. So when we chain together multiple statements, we're either doing ands or ors. And then we're going to return stand. And we could be explicit and say like else if sum greater than 21, then return bust. But we can also, because everything else is being accounted for, we can just do return bust. Right, and so now if we want to test this out, So let's go ahead and do 14. All right, so we're going to hit. If we do 15, we're going to stand. And if we do 21, we're going to stand. And if we do 22, we're going to bust. Okay, so in just a real basic warm-up control flow. All right, now for the next challenge, we're going to do a very famous problem here. And this is called FizzBuzz. And the instructions for FizzBuzz is the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out the 99.5% of programming job candidates. The text of the programming assignment follows something similar to this. Write a program that prints an object. So again, we're going to be using an object with a number of keys. The key is the number and the value is either the number, fizz, buzz, or FizzBuzz. But for multiples of 3, assign the key's value equal to fizz instead of the number, and for multiples of 5, assign the key's value to equal buzz. For numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, assign the key's value to equal to FizzBuzz. Otherwise, assign the key's value equal to the number, right? So as we iterate through this, and there is a hint, I stomp my foot on the ground and wink over here, iterate, so we know there's going to be a basic building block we're going to need to use to complete this. We would say key of 1, value of 1, 2, 2, 3 is divisible by 3, so we get fizz. 4 is 4. 5 is divisible by 5, so we get buzz. 6 divisible by 3, so we get fizz. And pattern continues all the way up to 15, where we get FizzBuzz, right? And that's our first FizzBuzz, and we keep going, right? So 30 is FizzBuzz, 45 is FizzBuzz. And so we're going to need to build an object. And I'll do this here real quick, and I'll dump this into the chat so everyone kind of has something here. Right, and this will help everyone get started. And just give me a second here. I'll dump this in the chat. So that's in the chat, and I'm going to.
All right, so we broke up into 3 teams and we tackled FizzBuzz. I know at least one of the groups got it. I think everyone was really close to getting it. Again, a lot of it is, I think the ideas and the problem solving is there. It's just getting more comfortable with the repetition of the syntax. So let's go ahead and tackle this. All right. We know that we're going to take in one parameter. So 1, and it's going to be a number, right? So I can call FizzBuzz 100, and I can return the number, and I should get 100 out of here. So I know that I'm passing my data in. All right. So what was the first step that we needed to do?
Create an empty object.
Yep, create an empty object. So we needed to create a data structure that was going to hold all of our key value pairs, right? So we're going to do we'll just call it object for now. And I said, just do it as an empty object. I'm just going to do a note in here. So there's our, and it's going to hold our key and our value. It doesn't need to look like it's in an array. We'll do this. So key value, and they're comma separated, right? And so we know that we need to count and that we need to iterate. So how do we iterate? What's the basic building block that we use for iterating? Loop, that's right. So for loop, while loop, however you want to take care of it, we'll go ahead and do a for loop this time. So let I equal, and do we want to start counting at 0?
No. No, that's not a good idea.
Okay, where do we want to start counting?
I would go with 1.
1.
Okay, counting at 1, because when we look at our example here, we see that we start counting at 1. There's no 0 case in here. And how long are we going to count for? When do we stop counting?
When we hit one of our 3 instances.
Well, so we want to stop counting when we hit the number, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to count by 1 here while we're going. So now, basically, I can take a look in here, and so I can say console.log I, right? And there's my count. So now I'm going to count from 1 to 100, right? And so one of the most basic things we can do is we can start adding this to the object. So we can say object I equals I, and this should just give me a key value pair of numbers. Oops. So we don't want to return num anymore. We want to return object. Oh, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, never mind. There it is. Because for whatever reason, there we go. Sorry, so I've got my extra console.log here. Why is that printing out twice? Interesting. Okay. So anyways here though, this is the object that I'm returning, right? So right here, and so for every instance though, I don't just want a key value pair of all the numbers, right? So I need to start taking on some different instances here. So one thing that I'll say, so we can say, well, we'll start with the first case here. So if and I saw everyone got this, and that's awesome. Just got to squint at my keyboard here. Modulo 3, 0, right? Then we know that basically this is saying if I is evenly divisible by 3, so there's no remainder, then we actually want to do something that looks like this instead, right? Okay, I'm killing myself here. Anyone tell me what I'm doing wrong? Because I am not seeing it. Something going on with the shell.
I think it is the site itself. I'm also working a problem, and I keep getting duplicate arrays.
Okay, well that's good. Then I'm not I don't taste almonds yet, so I'm not having a stroke. And I'm pretty sure what I've got going on here is correct. Let's do this. Okay, yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on here with this, but let me do this real quick. So again, this is VS Code, a free IDE provided by Microsoft. Looks like I've already got a FizzBuzz in there, so we'll do code. All right, let me just grab this real quick. Okay, so I'm still doing something wrong here. It's probably, well, that's what I'm doing wrong, is I haven't commented that out yet. So there we go. So now, sorry about that. The pitfalls of live coding in front of a group. So there's my fizz. And so what I was doing is I was going through and in the loop, assigning everything divisible by 3, and then going over the top of it and assigning everything a basically a key value pair of the numbers equal to each other. So next, we know that we need the Elsif. And let's take a look at I modulo 5 equals 0. And we're going to do pretty much the exact same thing. So object I, and notice when we do the array, like we need array.push to move a value into the end of the array, or the array.shift to move it into the front of the array. When we're creating a key value pair, all we need to do is basically call out what the object is that we're using. And then, sorry, 1 second here. Sorry, look. Hey, Jenna, can you not make a bunch of noise behind me? Sorry about that. Let's see here. And then we're going to go ahead and go back to this. We'll do the buzz. And so now when we run it again, we'll see that the things that are divisible by 5 are FizzBuzz. And if we do else, so now we have this. Now there's one last case left here. And did anyone run into any issues where they were basically kind of got trapped by this problem? And I kind of saved this for last. All right, so what happens if I come in here and I do this? Did anyone try and do it this way, where they got the FizzBuzz as their third case?
We did. Well, we tried it that way, but it didn't work.
Right, and because what's happening is by the time we can ever get to either one of these, they're going to get picked off in one of these as well. So we talk about our order of operations here, right? So we never see FizzBuzz actually show up. So the first time it should show up is 15, but basically because 15 is also divisible by 3, it basically comes in here, checks this first case, and then immediately says fizz, and then it moves to the next number, right? So what we need to do is something like this. Right, so now we have our FizzBuzz, like I should see it at 15, I should see it at 30, I should see it at 45, and so on all the way up through 90. Now, did anyone come up with an easier way to write this?
Just modules 15.
15.
Yep, so that is correct. So we get the product of the two numbers. And so now we get the same thing, and it's written a little bit cleaner. Yeah, I'll just take this and drop this back into here. All right, and so there's the FizzBuzz, and for whatever reason, I'm still getting the duplicates in here. I don't know. But
Line
this is,
12, you forgot to comment that one out. Line 12.
well, no, we'll need line 12 now. I think there is something going on with Replit where it's not clearing out the Replit each time it cycles through. So this is just like the history of it. So these are all my previous attempts, which is fine, but this is correct. So when I copy and paste this into the Slack channel, like this is the valid solution that we're looking for here. All right, so any questions about some of the stuff that we just covered with objects and with the FizzBuzz problem in particular? Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to do another problem as a group. I'll be the driver here and I'll kind of steer it, and I'll take input from everyone and we'll see how far we can make it tonight. And if we don't finish it off tonight, then we'll continue it on Wednesday. All right. So this is called the 2 strikes. Yeah, just pull this up here real quick. So write a method that takes a string array of license plate numbers. The method should return a string array of any plate numbers that appeared at least twice. If none of the plate numbers appeared more than once, the method should return an empty array. Right, so within the 2 examples here, we can see that 345 Bravo 317 appears twice in this array of strings. And so we return an array of strings that shows that. This one has no duplicate plates in it, so we just return an empty array. This one is going to be, again, as we move down the list here of the coding challenges, they'll continue to get more and more difficult to the point where, like, when we get down here towards the bottom where we start getting into recursion, the employee data one is kind of like the capstone for this 3-week course. Like, this is by far the hardest problem in here. We'll probably cover this in session 9. And it takes pretty much everything you've learned over the 3 weeks and rolls it into one problem. So this one's about halfway down the list, or 2/3 of the way down the list. So from looking here, let's see. We know that we're going to take in one parameter. And what type of parameter are we taking?
An array.
Okay, an array of what?
Strings.
Yep. And, you know, I'll even say I'll modify this a little bit. It doesn't even need to be just an array of strings. We'll be using those in the examples, but this should be able to handle pretty much anything. So, and our output is also going to be an array. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our first method call here. All right, so when I hit run here, oops, where is it yelling at me? Line 9, console.log 2 strikes. I think I've got an extra parens. No, I don't have an extra parens in there.
Just change it to strikes.
Yep, I see that. Wrong method call. Setting me up from failure right from the get-go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run this, and there is our array of strings, each one of these representing a license plate. So how do I break into this and iterate through each one of these?
The for loop.
Okay, with a loop. So, and I guess before I get overly specific into this, let's do some pseudo coding. Right. So, can anyone explain to me how they think this program should work? Like what it's doing on the inside?
The for loop should cycle between each element inside and compare it to the one right before it or right after it to see if they match.
Absolutely, you're on the right track. So exactly what we want it to do is that we want it to take a license plate in this array and then compare it to every other license plate in this array to see if it's a duplicate, right? Or to see if that it appears at least one other time. So that, yes.
No, I was going to say we're probably going to get to it, but my first thought was, how do we make sure that it doesn't compare itself to itself? But it probably won't be able to do that.
Right. We'll write the logic so that it's not comparing itself to itself.
Oh, okay.
So, but what we can do to make it a little bit trickier is do this, right? So now what happens when it sees, because it says at least one time, it should be added to it. So now we want to compare it, but make sure that if there's 20 plates in here, that it repeats 20 times, that we don't keep adding it to the output over and over again. Doesn't matter how many times it appears, it's just 2 or more times it should appear in the results array. All right, so what am I returning out of this function? Like, what's my output? It's an array. Yep. So that lets me know that I'm probably going to need an empty array. Okay. So now, I know we had mentioned it earlier here. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're now going to, instead of just returning the plates, we're going to return our results array. So right now it's just an empty array, right? So let's go ahead and write ourselves a for loop. So how do I see each of the license plates in here now? What do I want to console.log?
Strings.
Okay, so if I console.log plates, that's what I get. All right, so how do I access one element?
The block notation.
You have the block notation or box notation. All right, so if I do I now, remember that's my iterator. So the very first time this runs through, it looks like plates box 0, plates box 1, plates box 2. And now I'm iterating through each plate. Right? So I want to take a plate and I want to compare it against all of the other plates, right? And so now let's say that the very first pass through, I'm going to grab plates 0, right? And then I'm going to compare it against this one, 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 compare it against this one. There won't be any matches. Now, the second time through, I'm going to grab this plate. Do I need to compare it against the first one?
No.
No, I can, but I don't need to, right? And so instead of having to do this with 6 plates, so basically having to make like 36 comparisons, I can basically say after the first pass that this plate doesn't exist anymore. So how do I remove an element from an array?
Was it push? Dot push or?
That adds
Pop?
pop.
Was it pop?
Pop.
Yep.
Top of my head. Almost.
Yeah. All starts with a P, right? So what I can do then is I can take plates dot pop, right? So, and if, let me just do this here real quick for illustrative purposes. So what would I expect to see plates.pop equal to? And I'm sorry, that shouldn't be plates.pop, that should be example.pop. What should that be? This first
0.
one, right?
Well,
it's going to be the 0 index position. It's going to be the
Okay.
first one. Nope. So let's see here.
pop
I'm
takes
sorry,
off the last one.
not the first
Shift
one.
takes
Yep.
off the first one.
Yep. So sorry, got that one backwards. So right, pop takes the last one, right? And so it doesn't matter if we take the first one or the last one, we can go through it, but we can also do, would it be shift? There we go, is the first one, right? And now if I console.log example, after I've ran the shift command on it, right, I see that I only have the 5 plates that are left in it. So now I can basically take this and compare it against each of these, right? And if I have a match, then I can look at adding it to the results array. If it doesn't match, it's gone, and basically I can go through it again. Now, does anyone see any issues with the way this is structured now?
It's, we talking about more than aesthetic, or is the question in the actual code?
It's functional, and so
Understood.
let's go ahead and take a look at this. So when we do it this way, we need to basically go through, and so the first loop through here is getting that value, right? So now we need a second loop that comes in here and basically goes through each one of these. Now, if we do that, while we start doing the popping, we're changing the length of this. And so what I would say is we could look at, well, and let's see here, we can basically do this. So if I say, let plate to compare equal plates.pop, right? And so now I want to come in here and compare it against each of the plates that are left in here, right? And so, excuse me, we're gonna go ahead and do another for loop. And because we're already using I, we'll use J this time around. All right, and so now if we look at plate J, right, so I'm sorry, I can do, so now for each iteration through there, we're going to loop through over and over again, right? So now we'll see that the same things are coming in here. There's more than the 6 because we're basically iterating through the first time and then iterating through 5 the next time, 4, 3, and so on. Now, what we want to do is compare what's going on here with this. So let's see here. Let's go do this. We want to say if oops, sorry, not to match, to compare is equal to okay. Let's choose my changes. Okay, sorry about that. The Replit seems to be on one tonight. And how do we add a a match to, or how do we add an element to an array?
Push.
Okay. So results array dot push, and we want to do the plate to compare.
Quick question. Could you also use append?
I don't think append is a method on array. So JS.append, is that maybe on a string?
That could be where I saw it. I just know that when I thought of append, I thought of add. So I was just wondering if those are interchangeable.
It looks like the append has something to do with controlling the DOM, which is a HTML concept. And so it's not like you use it when you're writing HTML or JavaScript embedded in HTML for basically like web page viewing, but not when you're writing just like plain vanilla JavaScript, like the element.append, but there is no append on arrays. And
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So we go back to push and just look here real quick. So yeah, so there's no append for an array. All right, where were we here?
Before you run it, line 10 has one equal symbol too many.
Yes, it does, and that was the red error I just saw here. All right, and we got rid of our console log. Okay, so now the only one that we have that we know is a match is right here. And so we know it's 3 times, and for whatever reason, we're seeing it get pushed into here 4 times, right? So what I would want to do is basically see how can I avoid pushing multiples in here. And let's see what a Google search will do. Right, and so having an issue with my project when it comes to adding a duplicate value to an array on click event. Don't worry about on click yet, but basically we come down here and we look at the answers. 48 people have upvoted this answer, only 3 for this one, 1 for this one. With vanilla JavaScript, you can do this like the following: if array, so dot index of value triple equals -1, array dot push value, where an array is your array of values that you don't need duplicates of, or you can use the following ES6. So remember, ES6 is the most up-to-date mainstream version of JavaScript. And so it looks like there's an includes, right? So kind of like when we had the has own property, if we come back down here, and let's go ahead and uncomment this stuff. And I can say example dot includes right, so that returns false. But if I put 345 B 317 true, so we know it's in there. Does anyone remember, kind of back to the first night of class where we talked about how we invert a Boolean? What symbol do we use?
Bang.
Bang.
Exclamation point.
Yep, so the exclamation point of bang. So, yes?
Well, not symbol.
I'm sorry. Yeah, in JavaScript, it's going to be the exclamation point. So we want to say, basically, if the plate that we're comparing, the first plate that we popped off, is equal to one of the other plates that's in the array, that we then want to basically push that plate into the array. And if it's already in there, we do not want to do it. So we can say, and bang results array dot includes plate to compare, right? So now we're saying if that plate is already in that array, basically, so if this is true, so if that plate is already in the array, that's true. We want the inverse of that, which is false. And because we have the and operator, both sides of these have to be true. And so once this basically goes to false, we won't push it in there an additional time. Right, and so now we're down to that one time. Right, and the same thing. So if I say 1 AS5 GB7, now they're both showing up in there, but they're both only showing up one time. And same thing, if I take this, right, and I added in here a bunch of times, it only shows up the one time, but it also kicked out my other one here. Did I put something in wrong? One sec. Okay. All right, and I think this is coming from the fact that I did this as a double for loop, which was kind of the structural issue that I was talking about earlier. And so I would get away from that by doing this. Okay, and let's see here. Whoops. Line 10. That's why. So this would need to go to J. There we go. So, and that was, again, just a translation error on my part. And so while using the while loop, we get away from like having the double iterator, and I basically cut it out. So this one, like I said, was a little bit trickier. You get into the nested looping. You could clean it up even further from here by using like a built-in method to get rid of, I mean, it's still a nested loop structurally, but like you can clean up the syntax a little bit. You can see with this, like it looks a little bit cleaner. Now, with this one, are there any other questions that I can answer about this? I know we're kind of butting up right against 9 o'clock, and yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much it for the evening as far as the class, but as always, I'm happy to hang out and answer any questions that anyone has after the fact. I'll post up the challenges that we worked on. It does take a little bit of time for Zoom to complete the kind of like the encoding of the video. And then I upload it to Code Platoon, and then Tom has to then basically push it to YouTube, and it then has to encode again. So it'll be up tomorrow morning sometime. Any other questions I can answer for right now? All right, well, if no one's got any other questions regarding any of this stuff, I'm going to stop the recording at this point. I'll hang out for as long as anyone else has any questions, and then we'll be done for the evening.